Chile 2006, Part 17, Easter Island. For the last day I spent on Easter Island, I decided to give myself a treat by renting a car. In addition, I had no more will, desire, and strength to walk. And also, there were still some things scattered around the island which I wanted to visit and see. Finally, I agreed with the rental company to return the car at the airport the day after, and thus I actually transported myself and my stuff to the airport instead of taking a taxi, and everything turned out perfectly. Thus, when I got up in the morning, I asked my landlady to call rent a car, which she kindly did. Although later than I hoped, they did come to pick me up and took me to the agency. I found it all very interesting, as that was the first time I rented a car alone. I got a bright red wobbly small Suzuki SUV and I first headed for Punapao. Punapao is a chiseling site, a quarry, surrounded by hillocks. I passed by one of them, but on the other side, the day when I walked to Ahu Akivi. Punapao may be reached by a dirt road which provides access to cars, and when you get to the quarry, you can see around numerous scattered pukaos. The red hats used to be made precisely here, for this is the only place where the volcanic rock is red and good for chiseling. As you can see from the photographs here, again I was completely alone when walking around Punapao, but when I started to go down to the car, other visitors were arriving as well. Driving slowly along the road that cut through the island and enjoying the views around me, I reached the Anakena beach. When I got out of the car, I first took some photos in order to take advantage of the morning sun as much as I could, which turned out to be good since later on there were occasional clouds in the sky. Ahu Nau Nau also appeared different when the sun shone on its front. In one of the photographs, it is possible to see nicely some details of the Moai body. There are breasts and a navel, as well as arms and hands. Although the proportions are not harmonious, this still required a great skill and creative impulse. I don't know why, but during my stay on the island, I thought that the beach and swimming were not mandatory or very important. What a mistake I would have made had I stuck to this idea. This way, as soon as I got to the beach, I just left my things on a pile, put on some sunscreen and rushed into the water. It was fabulous. Afterwards, I sat in a partial shade under a palm tree, and there I read for a while until I got dry. In the meantime, more beachgoers came, but it was not crowded. When I dried, I went into the water again to refresh myself, but I also swam a little farther from the beach. Still, all the time I stayed within the bay. When I got out, I remained on the beach only for a little while longer, since the shadow of the palm tree moved enough to expose the entire beach to the bright sun, and I don't like to be that much in the sun. So I went to the other end of the beach, from where I enjoyed the beautiful view, and then I went back to the car. While I was changing into dry clothes near a wooden picnic bench among the palm trees, I enjoyed the bird song and the sound of the ocean which I could hear there, as well as the wonderful fresh and clean air that filled up my lungs. Then, in the car, I continued with my tour, following a dirt road that leads parallel to the north coast of the island. First I stopped at Ahu Tepito Kura. There is the biggest moai that has left the Ranoraraku workshop, so to speak, and that has been placed on an ahu. It is presumed that it was one of the last to fall down. It is 10 meters high, or rather long, as it is toppled down. Its earlobe alone is 2 meters long. By the way, Tepito Kura means the stone of light, and there in the vicinity of the ahu is the stone which, according to the legend, was brought by Hotu Matua himself. The place where the stone is positioned, in the opinion of the indigenous population of Rapa Nui, was the navel of the world, or is still supposed to be that. It is interesting that here I look for the stone in line with the instructions given in the guidebook, but I just couldn't locate it. I saw a stone for which I thought might be the one, as it had some unusual indentation, but I was extremely suspicious. All the time it turned out it was not the stone. Still, I'm not worried. There is the task for me for the next time when I go to the Easter Island. Still, without any worry on account of not locating Tepito Kura, I went on. All the time in front of me there was the cone of Maunga Pu'a Katiki volcano. I particularly fancied 2 side craters which seemed to me as if somebody had turned over 2 gigantic plates of soil onto the volcano's slope. The next stop was at Ahu Tongariki. I had already been there one morning, and then I said to myself I would love to come back again during an afternoon when the light would be better to see the moais. And so it was. This time it was not cloudy, and the light was truly perfect for enjoying in watching the moais, as well as for taking photos. I was so content that I could barely bring myself to get away from this place, and when I eventually did it, soon after I would stop at some other point from which there was yet another wonderful view at Ahu Tongariki. Even when I moved in the direction of the nearby quarry nursery on the slopes of Ranoraraku volcano, I would stop the car, get out and look back, and I was not disappointed. Still, there was a new visit to Ranoraraku volcano with its nursery waiting for me. Before I got there, I wondered again at this huge number of moais that was simply standing on the slope. Again, I walked among the moais that were lying on the slope, considerably covered in earth. And yet, just like when I was at Ahu Tongariki, here I also had an unusual feeling as if I saw, but truly saw, the moai for the first time. Whether it was a question of the light, or the fact that I didn't have to kill myself by walking to get here, or that I was not torched by the sun, or that I had previously been to Ahu Tepito Kura, where, although not finding the stone marking the navel of the world, that is, the center of the world, I was nonetheless exposed to its special energies. Still, that encounter, so to speak, with the moais was specifically heightened and extraordinary this time, and the moais were truly stunning. From Ranoraraku I drove in the direction of Hangaroa, along the road near which I had walked a few days earlier, and I can say that that section is definitely horribly boring, and it was only then that I realized how silly it was to walk there at all. As I drove slowly, Even my singing of some melodies was not sufficient to kill the boredom and the monotony of the whole episode. Only occasionally a certain view at the coast, the ocean, the waves, and the sun reflection diminished the tiresome experience. When I reached the first trees and forests once again, I became aware of my love for trees, any trees, as long as they are there. And then I also went to Ahu Vinapu. Beside it there is another Ahu, and according to the records of the 18th and 19th century sailors and travelers, they were destroyed at different times, and this is where the story about them apparently ends. However, Ahu Vinapu is unique on the entire Easter Island. Its significance lies in the fact that the Ahu itself, that is, its back part, which carries the load, was made of large boulders exactly in the manner used by the Incas, that is, by using very precisely chiseled and fitted rocks. This puzzles scientists, but I'm puzzled that they are puzzled. I'm not. This is how. Once upon a time, when I was a little girl, there was a whole series of fairy tales of the world published in line with geographic national affiliation. I loved fairy tales. So much so that later, when I grew up, I bought as second-hand all the books from the edition which I didn't already have. Nowadays, when planning a longer journey, a part of the preparations consists of reading the fairy tales of the people who live at my given destination. Thus, before going to Peru, I read the Incas' fairy tales, and there was a story, unusual campaign of Tupac Yupanqui, which clearly spoke of a campaign of this Inca that had led him to an island in the west, as well as of his return to the empire of the Inca, together with several representatives of the people that lived on that island. These people had different face features, curly hair, and dark skin. Galapagos is out because they could have brought only iguanas and tortoises from there. I know that fairy tales are not a precise account of any event, but oral tradition has its foundation in real events, with gradual enrichment with archetypes. On the other hand, Ahu Vinapu supports a possible authenticity of this fairy tale seen from the other side, so to speak. On the other hand, the existence of this support wall at Ahu Vinapu is used by the advocates of the theory that the Rapa Nui originally came from the continent. The Rapa Nui themselves claim that they are Polynesians, which makes sense taking into account their physical and linguistic characteristics. Still, regardless of which theory is more probable, the appearance of this manner of constructing an Ahu is truly very interesting. Be as it may, after my visit to Ahu Vinapu, I went by car to the center, going to an internet cafe as well as to the cathedral. Then I went back to my room as I needed to pack. In addition, as a matter of fact, I was starting to get rather tired from the whole day, the sun, my moving around, impressions, and the rest of it. So I was really happy to have an excuse, so to speak, to go back to my room. The renting of a car that day was a perfect thing to do. I managed to accomplish everything I wanted to do, and I was extremely content. The impressions linked to the light at Ahu Tongariki and Ranoraraku volcano were particularly strong. They were spectacular. And then, with those images in my head, I went to sleep. The following day, with no hurry, and after a late breakfast, I went to the nearby airport by car. This time, getting to the airport was stress-free, and it only added to the overall satisfaction that I was on Easter Island and that everything turned out in the best possible way. With me on the plane was that Polish gentleman, Arthur, whom I met the first days at the B&B where we both had stayed. This time we also had a great chat, and he gave me some advice about traveling for which I am grateful. In the evening I was already in Santiago, but before that one more greeting from Rapa Nui can be seen in the last photo published on my blog.